All right. How about this quote? Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear our to, and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and the Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will say this was their finest hour. Do you know who said that?
Churchill.
Churchill. And it was for which operation in World War II?
D-Day.
Oh yeah, D-Day was a big one. Uh, how far was it planning? Like, how logistically, how big was that?
Consisted of the Allies, all the Allies.
Yeah, and there was a large event to try to make the Germans think we were not landing on Normandy, we were landing much more south.
Yes. I mean, though the U.S. was more involved in Normandy, yes, we had other coastlines that we infiltrated at the same time.
Yeah, it was massive. Like I heard stories about how so many men died that day that the oceans turned red.
Yeah, because we come in by the ocean as well as we had the paratroopers come in the night before though that came in. They was actually supposed to drop in behind enemy lines and then come in from behind as the guys from the ocean actually came in front line. So we would have our men on both sides of the line, and they were supposed to sabotage a lot of stuff before the men got to the beach.
Yeah, and that's why I think Churchill, he said this was the finest hour because of how difficult that was fixing to be. They knew how much people were going to die and how bad it would be, which is incredibly brave for those people that wouldn't do that.
Yeah, because I mean it was definitely heavily fortified by the Germans.
Oh, yeah.
And they weren't completely by surprise that we showed up. It was just for the fact that they didn't know on that massive scale and to which degree that
Mm-hmm.
they was actually going to be coming in at. But they already had their men positioned for attack of any time and any kind. So it was major.
It was major. And Churchill had a lot of good speeches, but I think this one was probably one of his biggest, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's got one of the. He's I guess we can say he's one of the most quoted men of
Oh,
our
yeah, he was
time.
super quoted. He was a
Yeah,
good dude, though.
yeah,
And
very
it's
intelligent.
his I would say redemption arc is in World War II or World War One he led an attack on I think this place called Georgia Pole. He was going to open another front against the Germans the first time, but he failed massively. And so when Hitler rose to power and asked politely for the Sudetenlands, and they took it, and the former prime minister, oh, what was his name?
I cannot remember the
It,
name
it, it's not a great name. I can't remember it. And he said, "Nah, Hitler's a chill dude. He's not gonna murder everyone." And then, shockingly, he murders everyone. And Churchill before that says, "No, we gotta fight and we gotta, do this." But everybody was so worried about World War One, they don't want to start another one, and then it started another one.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how most conflicts are. When the Soviet Union ended, uh, just weird stuff started happening, and that's what it is now. Every end of a war starts a new one, but just not like how we see it.
Well, Hitler lied to a lot of people. I mean, and to a lot of countries.
Mm-hmm.
So when he would say that he wouldn't do this, he was actually doing it as he was talking, and already had things in planned to infiltrate different countries like Poland,
Mm-hmm.
as well as marching into France like he did, because France was the biggest standoff in the First World War, and they just mowed right into it. Which that goes into a conspiracy of whether the prince at the time for the UK actually gave information to the Germans about how France was actually set up and how because they the Germans went in and took over France just like they was a walk in the park
It was
as
like
they
two,
call
three
it.
weeks. Like that's
Yeah,
super short
so
for
that's
a
where it
war.
goes into the conspiracy that the prince at the time actually because he was allies with more of a Hitler at the time than he was with France, and that he gave up more secrets than he should have.
Hmm.
It's never been proven, but that's just more or less.
That's
That's
a
why
really
they
good.
say it's conspiracy, but it is one for the history books because a lot of people have done a lot of research trying to find out whether he did or not. It's just for a fact that at that time you could hide a lot more
Mm-hmm.
than you can now. We have more exposures like phones and internet that exposes a lot more people to what they do behind closed doors. Back then, you didn't have as much. I mean, you really had to have microphones set up and actually another spy in the room to be able to hear conversations go on to now you've got things like a phone that picks up everything you talk about.
Yeah, like what we're doing right now, that would be
Right. If
impossible
somebody, if
in the
we say
40s.
anything to trigger
Mm-hmm.
for them to be listening in on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
and we say a certain word, it may trigger them to listen in on that
Oh, yeah.
conversation as you're recording it right now, and thinking that we're going to be, traitors and doing
Mm-hmm.
something, and against the country now, and we're not. We're just talking about the past, but back then you didn't have that. You'd actually have to know when somebody was going to meet up and have somebody there, or have a spy that they're actually talking to. But that is a conspiracy as far as that goes.
I'll definitely take some looking into that.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's interesting.
oh yeah, it is definitely
'Cause, see,
interesting.
he's kind of blackballed at the time.
Churchill?
No, the prince at the
Oh,
time.
okay.
I'm not sure if he was like next in line at the time, or if he was like a cousin. I cannot remember, and don't hold me to any other name wise. I can't even remember the name, but it's in the bloodline of.
Mm-hmm.
It was before the queen actually took over.
Hmm.
I think it was like her uncle, if I'm not mistaken. So it wouldn't be very hard to look up.
Yeah.
So
So getting back to Churchill, he knew that this was going to be a disaster. He knew that, well, not a disaster, but he knew that the losses were going to be catastrophic, and they were.
Mm-hmm.
But it was for a good, a good cause. They knew what they were doing was the right thing, and I feel like, as much as important D-Day was and all that and everything that, as important as D-Day was, it was great, and we opened a new front. But I think another big issue was when Stalin had the officer purge, and he killed like 20,000 of his own members. And then Hitler, which was planning Barbarossa but didn't want to put it into effect until he dealt with us, was like, oh, I got to do this. And then he advanced on the Soviet Union. And then his forces were spread too thin, and then D-Day happened, and we rushed in, and that was the beginning of their demise.
Yeah, if Hitler didn't try to take on both sides at the same time, he probably would have been a whole lot stronger.
And also, if he made better allies with, if Japan wasn't with him, I think he may have done pretty good. But because Japan was there, they kind of screwed him over.
He also had to ally with Italy.
Mm-hmm. But Italy,
not that they was actually
they didn't really do anything.
War,
yeah,
they was kind of like Spain. They was we want to call it neutral, at that time. But they wasn't looked at as being a threat to Hitler. But yeah, Hitler tried to take on the war in two different directions, and he didn't have enough to really back it up. And especially when you're taking on the Soviet Union over on their own land and soil. So and they had the numbers to be able to hold back. He did damage when he first went in there because it really took him by surprise more than anything. But then once the Soviet Union was able to regroup, and then, like I said, he started spreading his forces too thin, then that's where Soviet Union was able to get more of a foothold and started marching towards Berlin. But D-Day that wouldn't have happened if D-Day didn't take place.
Oh yeah, because if D-Day never happened, Churchill never gave his speech and all that, he might have just bunkered and put down France, made it into a stronghold, then it went to the Soviet Union, got all the oil he could ever want, and then he would probably been unstoppable. So that would have been rough.
Yeah.
But thankfully, he overextended his reach, which is, good. But I'll definitely say that he did. Churchill had a great speech and definitely rallied the Allied forces to assist in the war, and not assist, just the war.
Of maybe people's opinion of how he was personally, and him and the Queen always didn't see eye to eye. He was a very good minister.
Well, that was.
If they didn't have him as a prime minister, they probably wouldn't have won.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And they can say that the U.S. won the war, but it took all three of them. To do it. If it didn't have the allies that we had, even though we wanted to take on the Soviet Union because they was down in numbers. And
so were we at the end of it. No one was ready for another war.
We was. I think military wise, we probably could have went in and eliminated communism in Russia, but it was more of a plan behind the doors that didn't want it, and they chose not to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that was.
And then the rest is history.
Yeah.
Literally.
Well, that was a great speech, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.